I'm Jane Akins, the City of Northport's Community Engagement Coordinator. Welcome to our new podcast, Voices of Northport. In this series, we aim to preserve the living histories that shaped our city's identity by creating an audio archive through the voices who lived it. Our guest this week is Chris Morales, Deputy Chief of Police and longtime resident of the City of Northport. Thanks for being here, Chief.
Oh, thanks for having me. This is awesome.
So, when did you move to Northport?
So my family moved to Northport in 1970. They moved from New York, and they moved for the reason we came here was my grandfather, at the time, General Development was selling all this land, and they were advertising it heavily up in the Northeast, and for medical purposes, it was better. The weather would have been better for my grandfather, so the entire family, all the three brothers, families packed up in. Several moved here to Northport, and a few moved over to Fort Lauderdale. So
that's
1970,
amazing.
Yeah.
That's great to have your whole family together too.
Yeah. Yep.
And what was it like in the 70s?
Well, I was a late baby boomer in the 70s. So, my family moved here in 1970. I was born here in 1979, and, Northport didn't have a hospital at the time. And the closest hospital back then in Northport was St. Joseph's Hospital. So I was born in Port Charlotte, but was born and raised here in Northport. And, back then in the early 80s, it was a really quiet town. There's probably, if I could remember, 3 traffic lights. I can remember Northport Boulevard, Pan American Boulevard, Biscayne, and that was the only intersections of growing up here in Northport at the time.
So the early 80s, I believe 84 was when the first school came in. So you must have been
Yes.
right in that first school.
So I was the very first kindergarten class of Northport Elementary School then, which is now Glen Allen. And when I became a police officer here in the early 2000s, they did a story on that as well as the first kindergarten class of Northport Elementary School, which was the only school in Northport. And I think the next school that was built was probably in 1990, and that was Toledo Blade Elementary. But for all those years, up until the high school was built in 2001, all Northport kids, commingled with Venice. So I was a Venice VAMS middle school graduating class there off of Venice Avenue or Center Road, and then I went to Venice High School and graduated at Venice High.
So what did you do as a kid before all of this was developed?
Wow. So as a kid, I was involved in my father was heavily involved in sports, in politics here with Northport, because our family, started a business here. But I was involved in Little League here, off of, believe it or not, Pan American Boulevard, and across from the Garden of the Five Senses was the Bob Glasser Field. And we've had Little League games there every season, and we played baseball. And then eventually Butler Park, I know the funding for that at the time, building of Butler Park was tight at the time to build the soccer fields in the front. And I remember as a kid, my dad was a big push for the soccer fields, and I remember as a kid laying the sod, kids from the community coming in, and the community actually helping, resurrect these parks back then to help get what they would need for the kids. And I was there laying sod for what would eventually be our soccer fields playing there, and I really got big into soccer. Soccer was a really big sport for me.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So, okay, you said baseball, and you're from New York.
Mm-hmm.
Yankees, Mets.
Wow. I'm a Mets fan.
Okay.
And my dad was a Mets fan. That's how I became the Mets, and rivalry with the Yankees, obviously. But, my dad loved, Gary Carter, the catcher. I got to meet him when I was a kid. Darryl Strawberry, Howard Johnson, all of those names are were my like heroes back then on the baseball team. So yeah, it was the Mets.
I was born in Queens,
Oh,
so
nice.
I'm also a Mets fan.
Yeah.
Big fan of Shea Stadium.
Yes,
I know City
yeah.
Field is also very pretty.
Yeah.
But
Never asked my father why. My father was from Brooklyn, from Bensonhurst, and my mom was from Clifton, New Jersey. So, but yeah, he was a Mets fan.
That's great. Good answer.
Yes.
So you mentioned your family had a business. Tell me more about that business.
Yeah, so Quality TV. My father when he came down with his dad here. They opened up a business, Quality TV, and it was first originated there, Ortiz Boulevard and 41. There's that Pine Plaza there, where there's now Gator Water, and there's a Italian restaurant. And the little history of that plaza is my family owned that plaza. They built it. My grandfather built that. My father ran Quality TV out in the front parcel there, window, and then on the basically, I guess that would have been the west side of the building, Ray ran a pizza parlor and an Italian restaurant there as well. It's a pizza and Italian restaurant, and they ran it for many years, and then they ended up selling the plaza there. But that originally was the starting point of our family there. We're starting a business, but Quality TV has been here in serving Northport since 1970, family owned and operated since 1970. I was a young employee of Quality TV, running through attics as a little kid because, my father couldn't fit through the trusses. And I was a little worm that could squeeze through. So I remember coming home many times itchy, very itchy from, fiberglass of insulation. So yeah, it was a good time. So it's very humbling, as a police officer when, growing up here. But when I became a police officer and carrying the name, a lot of residents here said, I knew your father. Your father was amazing. I knew your father. His father was amazing. And it was very humbling to hear that because, I lost my father at a very young age. Yes, thank you. I was 11 years old. And it was quite sudden. But my mom had to raise 3 boys. I was the youngest of 3. Michael, who now runs Quality TV, my oldest brother, he was 19 at the time. And then I have another middle brother. He was 12 and I was 11, so we're only like 14 months apart. But one of the things my father always taught me, even at a young age, it's amazing how you still remember certain things that your fathers or your parents teach you. But it was one of those things like, he's like, don't you ever ruin my name. I brought you in this world, I'll take you right out. Your name is your everything, and your name's your everything. So, I took that to heart, and I've lived my life keeping that promise, to my dad, making sure that the name is not ruined. And I pass that on to my kids, right? So I do that same sentence that he did to me because it's important, right? But, he instilled that in me. He gave it to me as I was a police officer, hearing everyone in the city talk about, the character of my father, his generosities he did. He was a big benefactor for the city. He was a volunteer. He was a fire chief. I don't know if we knew that, but he was the volunteer fire chief for the city of Northport back in the late 70s. One of the fire stations are off of Haberlin and Price is named after my dad. So it was, it's very humbling, and it's got a great little history to it about, my father, and now where I am today here with the city of Northport. It's quite an honor.
That is great. So talk about your police career. I heard that you started as a kid in the Explorers program and moved your way up a little bit.
Yeah, so, to even back up further about that, so let's go back to Northport Elementary School.
Okay.
When I was in the mid-'80s, Northport Police was involved with DARE, drug abuse resistant education. And I believe it or not, it's one of those things that are really near dear to my heart about DARE for our kids. And I took it to heart, DARE, and I truly believe that the DARE program probably saved me in steering in the right direction. And the program's been taken away from schools now because the schools are focused a lot more on, curriculum education and certain testing and where can we fit in DARE, and DARE's kind of taken a back seat. And Chief and I have been really pushing hard about, getting the officers back into the schools, getting, the drug awareness into these kids at this young age, because there's going to be a fork in the road at some point in their lives where they're going to make a decision. And it's that decision is going to be made on whether, were they educated? Did they know what these drugs were and what it would do to them in effect? So Northport back then had a DARE program, and it was ran by the police department. The officer's name was Bob Lovett. I'll never forget him. He recently just passed away too, a longtime resident. He was the he was the school resource officer. He had a portable out there. We would go and see as young kids, do and visit him, and just seeing him in the uniform and everything was so cool. And the pivotal point in my life probably was 7, 8 years old, probably. There was a question and answer one day in his portable with our class of the school resource officer. And one of the questions was asked was to him, and as he opened up this little box that had these little notes in it of, kids asking questions, was, why did you want to be a police officer? And Bob Lovett's question, it locked in on me. And he said, because I want to make a difference in someone's life. And, when he said that, I said, that's what I want to do. So I believe servanthood in our families, it comes at an early age, and it's, I just stayed clear of everything. I knew what I had to do. DARE helped me out. And, I went through life, growing up here, staying away from things that I knew that could be detrimental. Your friends would eventually say some things about you, like, oh, you're not cool and all that. But eventually, as you got in high school, I remember my true friends respected me and said, hey, we're going to go this, but there might be this here. We know you're not. And it was a respect thing. But I started Explorers in probably 1994, and there's some legends here, that were my, advisors, was Steve Lorenz was one of them. Steve Lorenz was my advisor. He's now, he's now the interim chief for the school board police, but he was a longtime supervisor here at Northport, went through the ranks, was lieutenant. But I started at a young age, got to learn the job, and it was a lot of fun. Because when you know your vision, when you know what you want to do, you're going to pursue it, right? So I went into high school. I took some. They had this a law enforcement class that you could get credits for through Sarasota Votech. And I took that, and I graduated from the class, and I got hired on with the Sarasota County Sheriff's Office at the age of 19, right out of high school. Wow. And I started in the jail, corrections, at 19. So, yeah.
So how long have you worked for the city of Northport?
So I started with Northport 2 years. I started with the Sheriff's Office in 1998. I put 2 years into there. I went to the academy. I paid myself through the academy to get law enforcement certified. So the sheriff's office paid for you to get corrections, and then if you want to continue on, you had to pay it on your own, right? So I knew, I'm like, well, I don't want to come back here. I'm going to pay. So I continued on at the academy. I slept in my car from 6 in the morning till 8 because, I worked midnights in the sheriff's office, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., and then I had to go to sleep for 2 hours and sleep in the parking lot of the academy, get up and go to the academy, put those hours in, and then be back at work again. Did that for a month, but the sacrifice was so worth it. So I started with Northport in July of 2000 here. And when I started here, I was the 44th law enforcement officer sworn in at that time. So,
that's amazing.
Yeah.
How does it feel like to protect the city that you grew up in?
Oh my gosh, the feeling, it's like family. It's like everybody's just family, and you're protecting your loved ones. It's making you have so much vested interest in the city, and you see where we've come leaps and bounds, and it's an honor, so to speak.
Okay, so now, what is your favorite restaurant? And it doesn't have to be here today. It could be a restaurant from the past. What is your favorite place to go out to eat in Northport?
So the favorite, like right now, the favorite place?
Or it could be something in the past.
Okay.
When you think of Northport and you think of restaurants, what do you think of?
Well, see, that's the thing is, and I strive is Northport. It's like the restaurants. We need more restaurants, but what resonates to me, and if you got some people listening, like the history of Northport, like as a kid, my favorite restaurant was called Uncle Guido's.
Okay.
I don't know if everyone heard. So when I was a kid, and it was not far from where I lived, but Uncle Guido's is now where Alvaro's is, and it was an Italian, pizza joint. And when we played soccer back in the day, a lot of the teams' games, were brought back for team food, gathering and wins. We would have it there. So if you ask me what first resonates to me, what was the favorite place to go eat in Northport was Uncle Guido's, and of course there was over by where the old post office used to be. There was a place called Little Italy. Pat, the owner, used to that. He used to have like the most incredible pizza there back in the day. But I worked my first job outside of quality TV as a kid. Getting paid by my family, if you call it getting paid. But was the Old World Restaurant. The Scachillises are long in the Zagrabellis of the Old World Restaurant were long-standing residents too of Northport. Some of the I would call them the pillars, so to speak. And they hire. I was close friends with their kid, their son, Mike Scachillis, and we used to play in the neighborhood, and then we would always go to the restaurant, and we'd always go in the back deck area. There was a little bar area when Mike and I would sit there, and Joe, the owner, Joe Scachillis, loved him to death. He was like a father to me. He would always come and go, "What do you want to eat? What do you want to eat?" And he always used to get me something, a hamburger. I used to come there, and he used to always take care of us. And they were the sweetest, kindest family in the city. And then I ended up working for them for a while. And before I went to go work, I worked for Publix in Northport, the first Publix. So it was great. Publix is another great company that teaches you respect and kindness to people and all that. So it was. I would have to say Uncle Guido's. Yeah.
Okay,
Guido's.
so if Uncle Guido's was still open, what would you order?
Oh, Sicilian pizza. So. You ever had Sicilian?
Absolutely.
Okay, so
I am Sicilian.
Okay, you're so so the square. They were known for their squares, and they were the bomb. I'm sorry, it was like I would tear them up and take them home to go and eat them. But Michelangelo's in Northport has you have to request it, but they can make Sicilian pizza. So it was the Sicilian squares, absolutely.
And controversial question: does pineapple belong on pizza? Be careful.
Does pineapple belong on pizza? Many years ago, I would say absolutely not. It's supposed to be the meat lovers type of style. That's very in the families of Italian. We're Sicilian too. So this is a great question. I've seen it change now so much to where my wife, who's also she's an Italian. She's from Long Island. She's now been introduced to. Have you ever had egg on pizza? It's like, it's a thing now. So like egg yolk or whatever. It's like it, and I can't get around it. But it's changed so much now to where the one thing I will get on my kids on though, you will not use a knife and fork to eat a pizza. That, from New York and all that, that's a disgrace if you eat a pizza with a fork and knife, right? So you got to fold it, you got to grab it with your hands and eat it. So
that was a great way to go around the question and not answer.
So the answer is, it's like, I would say yes, it is, but I'm sure there's people out there that'll say, I think the no's outweigh the yeses.
Yes.
So
I like it.
Right.
So what is your go-to spot in Northport if you would want to relax?
My go-to spot in Northport to relax.
And it doesn't have to be now or maybe when you were younger.
It's I don't know if I would say for growing up as a way to go and relax. My relax is getting out of this area just in general, right? Because this is where you're home. We brought up, but it's more of I think like the city's motto is live, laugh, live, laugh, play. And that's more of what I really engage to is I'm more of a relaxed. I guess my relax is my home, right? Where your kids are. But, Northport's more, I would say, to live, live, laugh, and play. But, back in the day is my relaxing and going fun is like, going out way out east and, riding out back there. Because back in the day, there was riding, of ATVs and stuff and hanging out with your friends or just going to the baseball fields and hitting. But probably the fun parts were of growing up in Northport was the interaction of just community. Some of the stuff like in today's days, our kids are now more into the technology, but I really enjoyed going out into the street, taking a tennis racket with a tennis ball and playing baseball in the street, tennis ball. So those were the days of having fun. And then, 3 kids became 6 kids, 6 kids became 12 kids. And you have, it's just, those were the fun times, it was like of all of us here together as a community. So
that's great.
Yeah.
If you had to give a newcomer one piece of advice about living in Northport, what would it be?
You're making the right decision. And I've used this before is because Northport, being, especially let's step back, being in law enforcement, I have many friends that I've networked with across this great country and state for that matter, and hearing the horror stories and hearing, their communities and what's going on is that I come back humble. And that's kind of why I'm very hyper vigilant about keeping this community safe. And I say that vested interest was, even with Chief Garrison and the formal chiefs, is that our vision was to always stay in the forefront of keeping the community safe, more so now than ever with technology. And the city has been phenomenal with technology and advancements here of keeping that why people come into our city to commit crimes or any type of criminality was, the risk versus, I always use this line, the risk versus the reward factor. Why we have cameras, why we have license plate readers in the outskirts of our cities, it's not to keep an eye on our community because, 95% of our community are good people. It's the 5% you have to be worried about. And the other percentage of that would be, or mixed into that 5%, or people coming from the outside. But if you keep the risk, why do people commit crimes? If the reward outweighs the risk, right? They're going to come in and create havoc. If your risk outweighs the reward, they're going to think twice, right? So when you keep that that risk elevation high over the reward, you're going to keep a community safe. And when you have a community here that doesn't tolerate, lawlessness or anything like that, that's what keeps you strong here. And I tell these people, you move to a great city to raise your family, to keep your family safe. We have the greatest schools in the state of Florida, I believe. I think we're like 2nd rated, which is good. But and not only that is, I don't know if you guys know this or not, but this was probably like 6 years ago, maybe longer, but out of the 40,000 students back then, out of 40,000 students in the Sarasota County schools, 10,000 of the 40 were from Northport.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, I don't even know what that is, but they're already talking about in the next 5 years of another high school, 2 more elementary schools, and a possible another middle school. So Northport is exploding, but still, you have to stay in front of that curve. Just like we're talking about, with the new police headquarters, we are, where we're at today got us through a couple years, but no one expected, no one did the dive into where is the city going to be in the next 15, 20, 30, 40 years. And we've done that, but we need to stay ahead of the curve. When you get behind the curve, that's when you're going to get, in trouble with lawlessness and crime and all that. But I have to give it to our commission, our city leadership, our city managers, and the support of the community that Northport is on the map of being one of the safest and affordable, believe it or not, still affordable cities in the country. So that's what I would tell newcomers, coming into this. They're coming to a great city to raise a family.
Well, and thank you to you and your team
Oh,
for protecting
it
us.
is. It is a team effort, 100%. And it's not just the PD. It's the entire city and community. So,
Is there anything that you'd like to add that I didn't ask when you think about the history of Northport?
no, it's just where we've come. Where we're sitting right now at City Hall. It's back when I grew up in the '80s. To put it in perspective, is Northport Boulevard, where our station is. Northport Boulevard stopped at Greenwood. Right there, just to give you an idea. Sumter and Price Boulevard was a four-way stop sign, but it stopped there. The interstate wasn't developed yet. When I was a police officer, to put it in perspective here, you ready for this? This is gonna blow your mind. When I was a police officer, I worked night shifts, so Toledo Blade and Price, which was also called, was it Choctaw? I think it was Choctaw Road there at one point. You could not cross Toledo Blade to head out east. It was a standing rule for the police department without permission from your supervisor, and you had to go out with two people.
Wow.
Yeah. And back then there was no street signs out there. There were these parking blocks with, stenciled street names on it, and the street names were stenciled on the roadway for the helicopters up there to see where, because navigation, GPS wasn't invented back then, right? So all that was done there. And I remember one night I was out there and I don't know where the heck I was, but I got so lost because it was maze out there to where I just remember I had to use, for my backup to find me, I had to use my spotlight up in the air like Batman.
Wow.
To help find out where I was out with this person, because there was a reason. It was dangerous. It was black darkness out there. You were just like in another world. But and that was, in 2000 and 2005 before I went to road. So in 2005, there was nothing past Toledo Blade. Nothing.
Wow.
And some of the stories, if you ask my mom, I'm like, Mom, when you moved here in 1970, I remember I asked her this. I go, what was it like? And she goes, the one word she said, it was a desert. It was a desert, So it's just amazing to see, Northport. What am I most proud about to see was that I had so much pride in Northport growing up, and Northport's always back in the days looked at as the little baby kid, right? We'll just call it that, the baby of the kids of the community. Now, in a sleeping, I always said to people many years that Northport is a sleeping giant. It's just, what are those igniters going to take? Now I believe the sleeping giant has awakened, and it's amazing, and it's an honor to be here to see this city thrive, to become a city to where all eyes are on them, watching them, and saying, hey, look at what Northport's doing. We need to be doing what Northport's doing. The igniters, I have to say, Welland Park is an igniter. I also believe there'll be another igniter probably way out east in the future of those undeveloped areas. But one of the things I'm most proud of with the city, and believe it or not, I want to tell you this, is the water park. People can say whatever they want about how the tax dollars were used or what, but Northport needed that water park. Even when my little kids, I was a big supporter of the water park, and I want to commend the commission and the city for putting that water park in, despite people's beliefs of what, but we have kids. We have so many thousand kids. When I say we had 10,000 of the 40 back, many years ago, and it's now these kids. We don't have beaches. We're inner. We're not coastal line. We're more of a centralized in the state. So as far as land wise, so bring those amenities to there. Make that igniter come in there. And I tell you what, I bring my kids there and I look. That place is packed to the bones, where I've told the director of Parks and Rec, Sandy, I go, you need to expand that. You need to figure out and expand that, because the city is thriving on that and the people are loving about it. And I can tell you, when I go out, people talk about the water park. I was just out the other day at a nail salon with my wife, with their hair, they're talking with her, and people were talking about this lady was getting her nails done, talking about the water park and how it was only $8, but the concession stand was so much, $3 for a soda. So I interjected and said, well, you do know why you pay a little more at the concession stand, because that helps offset the costs for the city to keep the $8 it costs you, to get in there with your family. Right. So she understood that when you explained it to them. But people talk about it, they love it, and I think that's one of those great landmarks that the city did. And, it's probably if people don't see it now, those are those ones where in 10, 15 years, they'll look back and go, man, they did the right thing. That was a good move.
Have you been down all the water slides?
I've been down every single water slide.
Okay.
I'm a water slide fanatic. I love fear. I love heights. I love, I even love that when you're sitting there and in the closed container and you're like, when is that button going to drop? It's like that's like the coolest part, right? So, but again, it's just it's an honor, and to be here, to be in a position I am, just to want to make a difference. It's all. I just want to leave here going, made a difference, made it a better place. And I do think it gives tremendous value and caring when you grew up in the city that you love, right? So it's a great feeling, and it's a great time to be in here right now. So
great. Well, thank you, Chris, so much for joining with us today and for your dedication and your protection. Your insights into Northport's history and future are truly inspiring.
Yeah.
So to our listeners, we hope you enjoyed this episode of Voices of Northport. I'm excited to continue learning from our local Northport experts. Until next time.